Hello, I'm Mrs. Cooling, and today I'm going to be reading The Little Girl Who Lived Down the Road by Nikki Daly.
"Wake up, Tomcat," said Tess O'Malley to her sleepy husband. Tom purred loudly. "Come on, lazybones, wakey wakey," she said. Tom opened one eye and said, What? "We're going to the sea today, that's what," said Tess, and she shook him until he was wide awake. Tess O'Malley woke the kittens, Billy, Barney and Lily. Billy, Barney and Lily called on Emily, who lived next door, and they walked down the road to meet Henry. Next, they rang Ben's doorbell. "I'll be with you in a jiffy," called Ben. When they arrived at the corner shop, Mr. Cashmere was hanging out a sign on the shop door. It read, "Gone swimming, back tomorrow." At last they were all ready to catch the train to the seaside. There was Mr. and Mrs. O'Malley, Billy, Barney, Lily, Emily and Henry, Ben and his good friend Mr. Cashmere, and, following behind, was the little girl who lived down the road. Everyone scrambled for a seat on the train. Mr. and Mrs. O'Malley sat next to each other. The kittens each wanted to sit next to the window, so Lily boxed Barney, and Billy waved to everyone. The train rocked this way and that, the wheels went clickety-clack, and the sound made Ben fall fast asleep. His nose twitched, and that made everybody laugh. Mr. Cashmere sat opposite a man who was reading a book on how to catch crocodiles. Henry and Emily sat beside a rather greedy elephant. "Oh, I do love peanuts," sighed Henry, hoping he might be offered some, but the greedy elephant ignored him. The little girl who lived down the road had to stand all the way to the seaside. At last they arrived. Everybody was very excited. They all began talking at the same time. "What a noise!" "I want to go to the beach," shouted Billy. "And I want to go to the fun fair," shouted Barney. "Oh, I want a strawberry ice cream," cried Lily. "Let's walk on the pier," whispered Emily to Henry. "Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside," sang jolly Mr. Cashmere. "What a fuss," growled Ben. "Dearie me," said Mrs. O'Malley. "It seems as though we shall have to go our own way and meet up later." Mr. Cashmere and Ben had their photograph taken. Mr. Cashmere held a monkey, who took a fancy to Ben's ear. Henry had a pretty blue heart tattooed on his chest, and underneath was written the name Emily. And the little girl who lived down the road bought an old top hat which had once belonged to a famous magician. In the afternoon they all went to the beach. What fun! The kittens buried Mr. Cashmere in the sand, and everybody wore swimming trunks, except Ben, who, being rather shy, removed only his shoes. The kittens did not like wetting their fur, so they did not swim. Mr. Cashmere, on the other hand, was an excellent floater. He floated on his back, and the sun warmed his large yellow belly. There was no telling how crocodiles behave in water, so when Mr. Cashmere jumped into the sea, everybody else jumped right out. Emily could not swim. She wore a pink tube around her waist to keep her afloat. Henry felt very proud of his tattoo. He lay showing it off until it turned bright pink from the hot sun. Soon it was going home time. "Oh, look at that sun," said Mrs. O'Malley. "It seems to be floating like a giant balloon on a green ocean." It was such a grand sight that for the first time that day, everybody kept very quiet, and they walked slowly while their shadows grew longer and longer. and the little girl who lived down the road had the longest shadow of them all. When they arrived home, Mrs. O'Malley noticed something missing. "My ring!" she cried. "Oh, I've lost my gold wedding ring." Then she remembered what the gypsy had said. "Ring of gold, lost with no trace, look high and low in every place." Everyone helped in the search for the ring. The kittens looked amongst the wet towels. Pockets were turned inside out. Bags were emptied. Shoes were shaken. Mr. O'Malley even looked inside Mr. Cashmere's enormous mouth. Still no ring was found. Poor Mrs. O'Malley. She was really quite heartbroken. Now the little girl who lived down the road took off her top hat. She put her hand in and pulled out a brass horn once lost by Mr. O'Malley, and a toothbrush which Mr. Cashmere had lost a few years ago. There was a teapot for Ben, and a lovely music box for Emily, and a clock which Henry had been looking all over for. The kittens squealed with joy when out flew their kite, which had once been blown away by the wind. And finally, of course, Mrs. O'Malley's golden wedding ring. "Hurrah!" shouted everyone.